Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Jim Morrison, and with us today, we have Kim Perotti, co-founder and co-president at Axis, as well as Jim Jenkins, chief appraiser at Axis. We'll be discussing what appraisers and AMCs can do during the tough market to succeed and push through. We also have a new segment at the end today called the Anonymous Appraiser. So let's get started. Kim, Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
So I do know the market is down right now, and everything started slowing down. We're seeing a lot lower volume. What is something that appraisers can do during this to really up the chances of being used as far as quality control and making sure what they're doing is showing up their best side?
Let me start real quick and then Jim can move in. There's two Jims on the call, but Jim Jenkins can move on to what we do in quality control. At Axis from inception, which was in 2009, we've always tried to work with appraisers who really want to build relationships. And during really good times, those appraisers who worked with us, helped meet due dates, gave us good communication, are the same appraisers that now in the slower times that we try to funnel most of our business to, because we want those best appraisers who've worked with us and supported us to be around after this particularly extra challenging market. So that's where we focus. That being said, I think every appraiser in the industry has that ability to create really strong bonds with AMCs. We don't consider ourselves just transactional. And Jim's team, the quality control appraisers that he supervises, work on the phones and communicating regularly with our panel. And Jim, do you want to take over kind of some of those best practices that you see and what we look for in appraisers in that role?
Yeah, first of all, we understand and realize that the appraisers that we contract with are independent and they own the analysis, and we're not going to opine on their conclusions, but rather make sure the report meets industry standards and our clients' requirements. Our whole existence in terms of quality control is for the 20 to 30% of appraisals that need help. And when I say need help, I mean maybe it might be a high CU score that's being generated, where we'll analyze what's triggering that, or just an ugly appraisal. It's a complex appraisal, and you can put as much lipstick on it as you can, but it's still ugly. And is that the property, the market, or the appraisal itself? Even the best appraisers sometimes get lost in the weeds. You could have a super complex assignment where you're focusing on the right comps, appropriate adjustments, and conclusions. And in your head, you're finally finished, but all that racking of the brain, maybe you've forgotten to address something critical to the understanding of the approach, whether it be exposure time or other little things. QC team is in place to identify those things that are necessary to get a report that's underwriter ready from the start. So we don't have to go back to the appraiser with questions the client has days or weeks later. That's frustrating for everybody involved in the transaction. And right now it's a good example is it's the time of year where we see the effective date of 2022 when the appraiser has inspected the property the first part of January. It's a small mistake, but it kind of slows things down. And I think everybody makes that mistake in writing a check or signing a document where they're still stuck in 2022.
Yeah, I've written two bad checks this year where I still wrote 2022 on it. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to the reconsiderations of value, what are some of the other things that appraisers on your panels may not know about what AMCs do behind the scenes?
Yeah, so I think ROVs, reconsiderations are the big thing. We screen every single one of them. We'll screen them for inappropriate commentary, targeted values, and believe it or not, we still get requests that say we need a value of X amount. I don't know where these folks have been, but we see it all the time. We see appeals that suggest comps that are already in the report. And oftentimes, we address an ROV and why the appraiser has come to their conclusions and prevent an ROV from ever even getting to the appraiser. Scope creep, that's another one. We try to take the creep out of the scope. And a lot of that is simply educating the client by breaking down why something isn't necessary to bother the appraiser with. The whole goal is to make the process more efficient for everyone involved. If we can eliminate just one request going back to the appraiser, that's a win.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, let's take a quick break for a commercial message, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
AI professionals. The Appraisal Institute offers a wide array of affiliations from candidate for designation and practicing affiliate statuses to designated membership and student affiliation. Whether you're a lawyer, banker, assessor, graduate student, or certified appraiser, the Appraisal Institute is the premier global association with a myriad of professionals either directly or indirectly connected to the appraisal industry. Become a member today or find out more at appraisalinstitute.org. Welcome back, everyone. Well, Kim, let's talk a little bit about some of the differences between appraisal management companies. Are all AMCs the same? I know you wrote an article that we published in the Buzz on tough times and tough AMCs. Can you talk a little bit about some of the differences?
Sure. And I actually was going back and thinking about what Jim Jenkins had said a moment ago. One of the other things that our quality control department does that I actually don't believe all AMCs do is appraisers often call us right at the beginning of an assignment. They get to a property and recognize that there really haven't been any, recent similar comparables, or they get to a property and see that there's a huge renovation going on. And rather than trying to work independently on the report, many appraisers do work in isolation. They'll give Jim and his team a call and they problem solve together about how to solve for that particular valuation question and problem. So there are many AMCs, not all, that do provide that service. And Jim actually even gets calls from our appraisers when they get an assignment from another AMC and ask for his team's guidance, because we really do care about the credibility of all reports. It helps the entire industry. So that would be another example of things that I think certain AMCs do. We have always been a community of learners. We have focused so much on education for realtors, education for lender clients, and education for appraisers, whether it be completely free or very low cost to help them fulfill CE credits. So that would be another example of what a really strong AMC partner would be doing on behalf of both its clients, customers, and appraisers.
All right. I'm gonna hold off right here. IMR cut. So is there anything else we want to say in that, or should I dive into the bias now?
What else should we say, Jim, about what strong AMCs do? Oh, do you want to talk a little bit about
I can add to that.
Yeah. Also,
Okay.
I was thinking about when an investor pushes back to a lender and the support you give lenders to mediate problems.
Sure.
All right, I'll cut us back in. All right, and Jim, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, really, there's two types of AMCs. Well, there's more, but there's two main types. There's pass-through AMCs that are simply facilitating orders. The order gets placed, it's broadcast out to a slew of appraisers. It goes to the first one that accepts it. They complete the assignment, the report's returned and delivered back to the client. Then there's AMCs that act as a branch or agent of the client. By the way, we never broadcast assignments out. We develop relationships with the appraisers that are on our panel and select who we feel will do the best job. We don't select the lowest fee or the fastest turn time. It's not uncommon for us to take the highest fee and quote because we trust that that appraiser giving that quote has done their due diligence and knows exactly what they're getting into. So acting as a branch or agent of the client, we try to think and anticipate how they do so we can get them something underwriter ready the first time right. And we also support them. Most of our clients sell their loans or have to comply with their investors' requirements. And those investors may have questions, concerns, and we really act as a partner with our client to get those addressed.
Well, yeah, I know that most appraisers who are on your panel appreciate that kind of helping out on them. And, you see on social media the ones that don't work with someone like that and how frustrating it is for them. So I know that you guys have done a great job with that. And I know the panel appraisers that you have completely agree with that. Let's change the topic a little bit and talk about the hot word right now is appraisal bias and what it means. What are some of the different types of bias and what can your clients expect when identifying the bias?
So I'm going to start just a little bit. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and even fear about the word bias. When we see bias in an appraisal, it does not mean that there is an element of racism in and of itself to it. We all have biases. We are socialized as individuals, inevitably create some level of bias. What we're hoping to do with, our appraisers is to help them understand that concept and then for them to start thinking critically about their work and trying to uncover their own biases to reduce them in reports. It could be something as simple as the language that is utilized in a report that maybe they've used for 20 years, or maybe recently to try to give more information to a client. They're cutting and pasting things from the internet without fully recognizing the wording within that and how that can lead to an unintended bias. So we look at bias much larger than just, racism or classism, but all types of bias that in your analysis could lead to a misleading or maybe not fully understood valuation. And then Jim, you want to talk about, exactly what you look for within quality control and how you help support appraisers to make sure that they don't make those unintended mistakes.
Sure. Yeah, we've cataloged roughly 1,000 words or phrases that could be perceived or could be perceived as being biased. So searching for those words and phrases is part of our QC process. And, I belong to several social media groups, appraisal groups on social media. And there are lots of appraisers talking about just simply not accepting the work in a Black or brown or minority neighborhood. And that's bias in and of itself. So being a good partner and addressing what bias really means, not necessarily racist, is very important. And as long as the topic of biases is in the bias in the appraisal is gaining national attention through consumers and the government, I think we should all be concerned.
And speaking of that concern, there have been discussions about a centralized agency handling all the value appeals completely and specifically the ones on bias. What are your thoughts on that?
In theory, I understand the thought process. We track the number of ROVs, and we see about 3% or less of our entire volume where an appraisal's being appealed, and about a third of those result in some change in the conclusion. I just don't see how a centralized agency could manage that process. One, the entity that's facilitating the appraisal should already be familiar with the appraisal itself. I just can't imagine a staff in that agency thought to be put in place could handle that type of volume and start from scratch. Think about the boom cycle and how backlogged would that agency be with a flood of reconsiderations piling up. Now, I do think if there is a legitimate bias concern that's been raised, then maybe the AMC should be removed from the process. If there is a bias, the case is going to go somewhere where the FHFA, FHA, or some other agency. So in theory, we kind of already have that in place, but when it gets to that point, the damage is usually already done.
And I think lenders and AMCs, regardless of where the decisions are made with the agencies, can do themselves a favor by having a very clear, transparent, and reproducible process for reconsiderations of value. And part of that process should be an appeal. If the ROV comes back and there are still questions that weren't answered or weren't answered in a way that makes sense to the consumer, then there should be an elevated process. It doesn't mean that an ROV should live in perpetuity, but there has to be a process that is transparent, that everyone can understand, and it's consistent across channels.
Yeah, well, that's great information, and I completely agree with you both. And Jim, seeing some of the stuff on social media about how they just refuse to take it, I understand that. I see that too, and that's just the wrong way to handle it completely. So it does help when you have somebody in your corner helping you through this process. We're going to take one more quick break, and then we're going to come back with our new segment, Anonymous Appraiser. We've got exciting product news. Cubicasa, the floor plan app, has announced free floor plans are now available across the nation. The best part is it only takes 5 minutes at the property to complete the scan with no disto or measuring needed. In addition to the free version of floor plans now offered across the US, Cubicasa will also be making available ANSI-aligned digital GLA products for as low as $15 per scan, as well as expanded options for you to configure the product to best meet your need. To find out more or to start your free scans, visit cubicasa.com. Well, welcome back, everyone. So we are over 100 episodes into the Buzzcast, and we've decided to add a new segment now. We do get questions a lot from our readers, and I think this is going to be a good segment for people to send in questions that they may be afraid to ask on social media through the backlash or just it getting out there. So we got a question the other day from an anonymous appraiser that says, I'm a trainee in blank, and I'm a regular listener to the Appraisal Buzzcast. I was wondering if someone might be able to offer some thoughts on what to do if my sponsor had me sign a non-compete or non-solicitation agreement. I should be cleared to take my certified residential exam sometime this spring, and I'm not sure how to proceed once I'm licensed. Thanks for your help. So I will say that's a really tough situation to be in. I know it's hard to find a mentor as it is. I want to let everybody know these are our personal opinions and not legal advice. So I would recommend you contact a local attorney in your state before doing any decision. But what do you guys think about this question?
Yeah, so as an employer, you know, and I when I onboard a new employee, some of those employees do come to us that their former employer has had them sign a non-compete or a non-solicitation. And as part of that process, we have to figure out if in fact we can, you know, complete that transaction and have that person become part of the Access family. I'll say a couple things about it. One, there's a huge difference between a non-compete and a non-solicitation. A non-compete typically has language in it that says, once you leave here, you can't work in this field, which is very different than a non-solicitation that says, look, once you leave my company for a period of time, you can't reach out to the clients that I've gathered. Which makes sense, right? If an appraiser is willing to take on a trainee, which is a huge, you know, time commitment for that appraiser, they don't want that trainee to turn around and then try to take the clients with them. So that's understandable. Non-competes are different because depending on the severity of the non-compete, it can actually set it up so that the individual who has, you know, gotten credentialed, has all their education is in a field, and now suddenly they aren't able to work in that field, which is a very different thing. Many states consider non-competes unenforceable. So one of the things they need to look at is, what am I signing? Am I signing a non-solicitation? Am I signing a non-compete? What's the severity of that particular non-compete? And then do I actually live in a state where the state's going to say it's not enforceable? So for example, if that trainee lived in California, non-competes are not enforceable in California. But again, back to your point, Jim, anytime you're in that situation, it's worth the time to spend the money on an attorney to really understand what that particular contract is asking of the individual who is thinking about signing it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And like you said, there is a difference between the two. I would recommend that as far as if you are going out on your own, not going after their clients, reaching out to new AMCs, you know, starting off on your own foot. I do know that from what I understand in certain states, if the DNCs are too much of a burden, they can enforce it because basically you spent all this money to get licensed and now you can't work in that county or state. So it really depends where you are. I would double check on that. You know, another idea I had is, you know, some of these hybrid desktop inspections is maybe doing the inspection part of it, going out and doing those and learning the area through that. That might be something that you could do as you're going through this process. But I know it's a really tough situation. I would get out there and I would meet as many of these AMCs and lenders and meet them face to face. I think that's a great way to do that. You could either do that at Evaluation Expo or a conference or something like that. So we hope you can talk to a lawyer and figure it out. And welcome to the industry. We're excited to have you.
Yeah.
And I do think you just hit on a really important point as you're, you know, determining which AMCs you're going to work with. Pick up the phone. You know, Jim and his team, myself included, we love talking with appraisers, and the more we get to know them, the fewer problems there are, right? Because sometimes in an email, something can be misconstrued. So picking up the phone and talking to us, we're real people. We put on our pants the same as everyone else, and really do appreciate having relationships with the folks who are providing an invaluable service to their communities.
Well, thank you guys so much. I think this is a great episode. I think that people are really going to enjoy it. And let us know what you think of the new segment. If you have any questions that you've been afraid to ask on social media, reach out to us at comments@appraisalbuzz.com. Thank you so much, Kim and Jim. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thanks to our sponsors and thanks for our listeners for joining us. Have a great day.